Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'd like to talk to you about planning from A to B, which is IFR, cross-country planning. And I want the goal to be that the student will be able to identify major aspects of the overall flight planning process. Do you like barbecue? I like barbecue. What if I told you that the best barbecue joint in the whole world was roughly 100 miles from here? Well, that's a bold statement in Texas, but anywhere in general. So you might want to call me out on that. So let's flight plan to an airport with some good barbecue, and we'll see if my claim is true. Since I don't have a student with me here, I would begin asking questions about the reading, starting with, did you have any questions about the reading? And then I would answer them and walk them through an understanding of the stuff that they didn't understand immediately. I might also ask questions to assess understanding of the reading, such as, what is a federal airway? And I can expect anything from, I don't know, to, oh, it's the one with the V on it, or it's a Victor route. Or I can get things as detailed as, oh, it's between two navigation aids and it's 4 nautical miles on each side of the center line, starting at 1,200 feet AGL up to, but not including 18,000 MSL. And based on the answer that I get, I can understand how much the student has read or has previous understanding, depending on the student's background. Are they a 2,000-hour helicopter CFI that's just trying to add on an instrument rating to their single-engine private? Or is it the 40-hour private pilot that is now moving into instrument training? Or is it that private pilot that's trying to do private and instrument at the same time and they've only got 20 hours? It just depends on the student. So then I would handle each question appropriately, and then I would assess and judge and then move on from there. Can you fly? Well, that's a really in-depth question, isn't it? So, did you get the weather? Now, 91-103 says, you must become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. That's a really big, all-encompassing statement. You must become familiar with all available information. Now, I'm guilty of it also. I've gone to the airport, looked outside, yep, it looks good, went flying, but I didn't understand something, and I get up there and I'm like, wow, it's really cold up here. And I didn't know that the cold front was coming through because, I didn't check it. Now, I've since gotten better and developed much better habits, and now that's not so much a surprise for me. Surprise weather truly is unforecasted for me. Now, do you qualify for the flight? Soon these students won't necessarily be students anymore, and that leads into, currency and proficiency. So you have 6157 states that you must have 6 instrument approaches, holding procedures and tasks, as well as intercepting and tracking courses through the use of navigational electronic systems within the last 6 months, or you need an IPC. Now, just because you meet those requirements doesn't mean that you can neglect the other requirements for maybe carrying a passenger. So that still applies. You're just adding that into your ability to fly, and in particular for this flight, all right? Now, does your airplane qualify for the flight? If I have like a 1920 something aircraft that's got a compass and a turn indicator or something like that, it's not going to meet the requirements. So we add in 91-205. So in addition to the day VFR and night VFR requirements, you also need a turn coordinator. Radios are now a requirement. Weren't a requirement before, but now they're required. The adjustable altimeter and installed clock, alternator or equivalent, attitude indicator or equivalent, as well as a heading indicator or equivalent. Now, once we have all these things, we've determined that if we decided to fly, we get the weather, do we meet the IMC, IFR requirements? So then we decide, where do we go? What kind of routing are we going to get? Now, we could plan a magenta line direct from San Antonio area, the Stinson Airport, directly to Junction. But that's not likely. It's also not good planning. A route that I've flown before, I've flown the orange one from Stinson Airport to the Center Point Vortac, then over to Junction Direct. Mostly that's a VFR kind of day, and you're just with your instructor and you're just going about doing things without so much ATC help. The blue line is also a pretty common route if you're actually flying IFR, but there's an even more likely one, and it's something that if you're in a true IFR environment, it's not IFR on a VMC day. The green line combined with this segment of the blue line is the most likely, because it takes you from the Stinson Airport over the top of San Antonio International Airport, which is a very busy airport in the local area, to the San Antonio Vortac. And what that does is it puts you midfield over the top of everything, so the likelihood of you encountering traffic is a lot lower. Then they send you on direct to Tatar, and then on to the Junction Vortac. Another one would be from the San Antonio Vortac direct to the Center Point Vortac, which we'll talk about that one in a second. So what kind of operational things can we configure? What about a diversion? So along the route, if I'm VMC versus IMC, right, that's a big difference. If I'm IMC, I'm pretty much limited to green and blue airports because I'm going to need some kind of approach. Hopefully I've got something that can let me down that approach. And if I'm VMC, I can now include the browns in there as well. Is there a preferred IFR route? Well, you'd check your chart supplement, you'd look up this route and say, nope, there is not, because I've already checked. Now, what about, things to consider in the departure environment? Yes, you might get a departure procedure. It's not very common for this area. Radar vectors are the most common. And something to consider with that, if you get your clearance and it says cleared to the Junction Airport via radar vectors, then Victor 68 to the Center Point VOR, then direct, you're expecting Victor 68 to the Center Point VOR and then on direct. They radar vector you, let's say the green one, and you're going towards the San Antonio Vortac. Now, what if they say cleared direct Benny or cleared direct Center Point, but you are expecting Ryu? What do you do now? Well, obviously what you should do is go direct to the next fix, but I guess the point is be prepared for something like that. They can amend your route in flight from anything from direct Ryu to, hey, go direct to Center Point, or even clear direct Junction. And then that pink magenta line becomes your reality now. It's all possible. You must be ready for it. So what about in the arrival environment, right? Well, when do we get the weather? When do I contact CTAF? I would contact CTAF when ATC tells me to contact CTAF, right? I wouldn't want to just switch off a frequency when I can't see where I'm going. Maybe I'm cleared, maybe I'm not for an approach, but I definitely wouldn't want to stop talking to him until I was told to do so. Now, what are the obstacles in the local area? Now, if you look here, you don't really see anything. So it might be really helpful to open up a VFR supplement, or rather VFR chart, open it up and say, wow, there's a lot of hills and obstacles in the way in this. I better mind my P's and Q's and make sure I'm on my target altitudes, make sure that I'm on my routes appropriately, because I don't want to make a mistake and hit one of those big cell phone towers that's sitting on top of one of those hills that's out there, because they are. So how much fuel does the airplane have? How much is required for the flight? So 91-167 says the fuel required is fly to the first point of intended landing, then to your alternate, and then for 45 additional minutes based on normal cruise speed. Well, what altitude do you fly? Well, 91-177, or rather 175, says from a western altitude, I would fly in even altitude, meaning the even thousands, so 4,000, 6,000, And if I was flying eastbound, I would be an odd 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, 7,000. How long would it take me to get to those required altitudes during flight? Now that's one of those things that that's based on your POH, and that's just something you need to plan for. These are the references that I used during my presentation. Thank you. We'll see you next time.